Hi, everyone. So we're excited to be launching two new spaces where we can continue to interact and collaborate with you all more and help you get the most out of Test Modeler and test data automation. So firstly, we're going to be launching our new Curiosity Support Desk. This is an easy to use support portal where you can raise tickets directly with our technical team. So you'll be able to have direct access to a Curiosity support member when you encounter any unexpected bug or problem in our software. You'll also be able to see the status of your ticket as we work on it and view any other tickets raised by other members of your organization. And we encourage you to use this just as the quickest way to resolve any issues that might come up. And we're also going to be launching a new support forum. So inside of our GitHub, there is a forum called Support and Knowledge. This is a new community to talk about all things Test Modeler related with fellow users, including the Curiosity team. So here you'll be able to find answers to questions other users may have, discuss best practices, and also raise and view the status of any enhancement requests and new features. You'll also be able to see what our development team is actively working on and join a growing community of users to learn from one another. So I'll take control of the screen for just a moment for a quick demo. All right, so this is the new Curiosity Help Center. Up here, it's directly linked to our knowledge base, so you can search for any articles or existing documentation about questions that you may have. And then if you do want to contact us directly, down here, there's two options to either raise an enhancement request, or you can directly contact us about an issue you may be having. And this is the support forum. We do encourage you to either attach a picture or record a short video and let us know how urgently the issue needs to be resolved. And down here is the option to share it with the rest of your organization. And up at the top, you'll be able to see the request that you've created and the current status of it, and also communicate directly with the support team through this ticket. And you'll also be notified through email when tickets are resolved. So that is our new support portal. And this is the knowledge and support forum inside of GitHub. So there's two areas in here that we encourage you to use and keep up to date with us with. It's the discussion forum here, where we'll be having conversations about how to best use Test Modeler, and any commonly answered questions that we receive, we'll be putting into here moving forward. And on the left-hand side, there's an option to view issues, and this will be updated by our development team. These are things that we're actively working on and feedback that we've received. So if you click onto these moving forward, you'll be able to see what we're working on internally. So those are the two new spaces that we're launching. Now I'd like to go ahead and switch over to Paul Wright, who will be showing you the new customer learning portal.
Hi there. Thank you, Lina and Mantas. I guess you can hear me okay. And it's exciting that you emphasize the idea on the slide of like user-centric approaches and building community there, because these are 2 points that bed down really with this next part, Curiosity's learning portal. And for this segment, it particularly relates to best practices, which any learning portal should hope to impact. So for the next 5 minutes or so, before handing over to James Walker and Reese Williams for a more technical update, I'll orientate you on Curiosity's learning portal, really at a high level about the what's, the when, and the whys, touching on its goals as a resource, and wrapping up with showing some indicative content and its structure. But just a little introduction about me, Paul Wright. To put my role in the context of learning, I'll just add that I'm a trained technical communicator and having specialized in designing self-paced learning resources. So I'm quite thrilled actually to be building out this learning portal alongside the colleagues to enable more successes for you. And I'm quite cognizant about you too, because it's a pleasure. This is my first time presenting at a Q webinar. So for returning and new customers and partners, thank you for having taken the time to listen. And for some of you, I know it'll be breakfast time. For others, you'll be wrapping up the end of the working day's activities. So again, thank you there. So for the learning portal, if I move to the next slide, there you go. I hope it embeds this sense of unity where no matter where customers are, you get a sense that each customer can be taking on board the same perspectives and good practices. And so there's a like-minded community that we're also trying to build out here with the learning portal for a shared approach, a common goal. It's been conceived as a self-paced tool, as a learning hub. And so what of the what's, the whens, and the whys? It's at the heart, it's a repository. And I know it's abstract to talk and not show something that's a resource that clearly requires you to click and engage with it. But a word that is really on point here is the word deductive. This differentiates it from the characteristic knowledge base that we have. And I think the knowledge base is more about step-by-step, the how-to guides, it's quite inductive. It expects you to pretty much follow to the letter how to get from the beginning to end. But by contrast, the learning portal presents you general ideas, it's general best practices, and maybe they transform into common practices. So there's no specific how-tos, it's more pitched as content where it impacts you individually at your team level, and you're all stakeholders focused on a broader project outcome. So it's a repository, it's tightly produced, there's video clips, printables, and quizzes that lay out the terrain of best practices and approaches. Operationally, I think it fits into your day-to-day because the content is modular. You can bring yourself to it at a point where you have a break. It's a learning journey that's easy to tackle. Now, if I jump to the next slide, the final slide before I take you through to show you its structure, it gives you the goals and objectives. And there's a couple of screenshots I've put here that show you the structure really. There's a series that we have called Art of Modeling, and we're just building that out right now. So that'll be a focus on the learning portal. And that I'm going to show you one of those as an example. And then more generally, learning resources with overviews for each point. Okay, so if I switch and give you this time more of an idea of content rather than structure. So we've landed here on the first intro page that you would click, and we'll be putting 60-second introductions from various people. And
so sorry to interrupt. Sorry, Paul. I'm still seeing your PowerPoint slide. That might just be me, but maybe you might need to reshare.
Yeah. Let me find. Zoom, where are you? It's asking me to leave the webinar. I wonder if it crashed out.
You can try stop sharing your screen and then,
Yeah. Okay.
Start from scratch.
Okay.
Nice one.
Are we
Perfect.
Good to go? Thank you. Thank you for that hint there, Tom. So yes, it's not just the structure, but now some content. We're building it out. So it's very vanilla right now. There is a familiar left menu items. And the 60-second intros will allow you to look through the page and, for instance, unit 1, and then there will be the options for units. If I then show you an example of a video page, this one we've called Enable Exploratory Modeling. And there's a video to play, it's probably 2 minutes, extra reading at your fingertips. But to make it a little bit interactive, everybody likes to answer a few questions to just verify that they're absorbing and quite actively absorbing. So this is an anonymous Google Forms right now, and there's 5 questions, multiple choice questions, and it just encourages a little bit more active impact of these learning materials. And the final one I would like to show you is other content. It will be similar. It will be bite-sized, 2 to 3 minutes. And it's about pulling out our understanding as curiosity and sharing that with you. And that's really what I wanted to show you today. And so it's a pleasure. Thanks for your attention. And I look forward to answering any of your questions. It's very much appreciated. So maybe over to James and Reese.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much, Paul. That was amazing. Okay, so let me just come in and share the screen here. And hopefully this is coming through. Okay, so we're going to be going through some of the new enhancements, new features that have come into Test Modeler. I'm going to be showing a couple of pieces, and then I'm going to hand over to Reese, who's going to go through the new data painter screen and some of the new functions we've exposed inside it. So the first one we're going to talk about is our integration with Testery. Now, Testery is a cloud test execution engine for parallel tests. And I think what really differentiates it from a lot of other cloud execution tools is they're not just interested in UI automation. They also do API testing. They also do ETL processes. And basically, any kind of process you have, Testery can bring it under control. They can orchestrate any test cases under there, and they can execute those tests against whatever environment they need to be. Okay. So we've been putting some work in to integrate Testery with Test Modeler. What I would say is that if you're interested in learning more about Testery, you can head over to the testery.io website. You can take a look. You'll see some of the big customers they've got, and you'll see some of the user interface, et cetera, et cetera. Now, what we have done in Test Modeler is very much like our other integrations that we have. You can come in, you can create a model. When you come out and you generate your automation, we obviously go away and generate that associated automation code. But then what happens is, as part of that execution, what we will do is we publish the tests into Testery. And then those tests become available inside the Testery platform as assets that can be executed. Okay. So the first thing here is that they get added to our test plan. Okay. And then what we can do is whenever they are executed by some kind of trigger, so whether that be through a manual, execution to go and execute these automated tests, whether it be through some kind of trigger through a pipeline, whether it be a new commit has come into Git, and then we're going to execute those tests. So you can set up various triggers, and then as part of that, those executions come through into the platform. So you'll see here, we've been doing some Cypress testing. We've got the various tests and the results in the dashboard here. We can come in, we can take a look at those. We can see we've got 7 tests that were executed from Test Modeler. We can open those up. We can see, the different logging messages as they've gone through. We can see screenshots, and we can also come through and we can see videos of the test execution as it's gone through, the different automation scenarios. Okay, so this is the first piece. It's a little integration with Testery, which allows us to come off and basically parallelize tests and orchestrate them extremely easily through a central dashboard view. So the next one, I'm just going to hand over to Reese, if you're okay to pick this one up.
Yeah, thank you, James. Hi, everyone. My name is Reese. Just going to quickly take you through the UI rework of the data painter functionality in Test Modeler. The data painter is used for integrating models with rich test data. You would use it when you want to create, look up, or calculate test data. So I'll just go ahead and share my screen. Yes, 1 second. Okay, share. Okay. So here I've created a simple model with the aim of generating random sentences. It's all nothing fancy. So first things first, I want to show you two different areas you can use a data painter. One might be within variables. So in here, we want to generate sentences. We want to add a variable into and create a or generate a set amount of sentences. So we can create a variable called count and click this blue button here, which will open the database screen. Within the database screen, you can see a list of functions on the left and references to the modeler screen on the right, data pointers. So for example, we want to generate a random integer. Plus button that's gone across. These placeholder values you can tab between for easy access and data entry. So we want to generate a random integer of minimum size 1, maximum size 4. I'll click the preview button here just to make sure it's syntactically correct. So we'll see, yeah, so that is fine. So now this variable has been created, we'll use it within the model. So here we have a task box called generate sentences. Within here, we will do similar just then. We'll load up the data painter, but this time we are going to generate some random, so some sentences. Sorry. And as you can see here, this sentences takes a argument of count of how many sentences we want to generate. In this instance, we will this time reference a variable you created called count here. So you see, this has been replaced. And now if you click preview, we'll have another pop-up. This just gives you the opportunity to override the count argument, but we want to keep the same as it is, as a random integer between 1 and 4. Press OK. And as you see, 4, well, 3 random sentences. Do it again, should change. 2. It also here just changes to a static value of 3 sentences, etc. What you can also do is you could concatenate this. So for example, you might want to pretend this is a quote. Full name. Preview that. 4. You see, you got the quota's name by here and the generated data on the left. Another thing we have brought into the new reworked data painter is the ability to reference lists within the data painter. And hopefully I'll pass across to Hugh to talk more about this.
Thanks, Reese. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, fine.
Cool. Hi, everyone. Okay, I'm just going to do one quick slide. I've spoken about lists quite a lot in the past, but basically the idea with lists are they kind of protect you from the physical infrastructure. They are objects that can be used all over the place in Modeler. I think I showed you how to use them in drop-down forms. You can use them in data generation. You can use them to drive subsets. You can use them as and create your own little consoles, etc. But in a nutshell, what we have is sitting over here, we've got all sorts of different places that you can populate those lists from. It could be databases, files, applications, APIs, mainframes, messages, it doesn't really matter. And then we have kind of an automated refresh. The idea would be that, especially for automation, is that you would refresh your list just before your automation runs. So if you're going to get some information from the database of a target system under test, you would just create that list. But inside Modeler, it's just a list. You just use that. Okay. Now, if we go back over to, actually, let me just show you around. Remove this horrible bar off the top here. If we look around at the sort of different types of lists here, for example, this one here is an example. And what we're actually doing is using an API. If I wanted to reload that API, this is going to go off and connect to Transport for London, and that would be refreshed. You could also use SQL, you could use Excel, you could use data sheets, files, whatever you like. Now, the one we're looking at the moment is, let's just go to some couriers, if I can find them. Couriers, where have you gone? courier routes. Okay, so what we have here is we've got a set of from countries to countries. These are the couriers. Now the couriers, based on the dangerous good indicators, can carry various different packages, and they have various different courier route numbers like so. Okay, now if you go into, now this is a relatively complex model in terms of what I'm actually doing is creating lots and lots of different messages based on the combinations of from and to countries, and then we're playing around with different payment days, we're messing around with some bad sender codes and things like that, and it's a classic bit of modeling that you'd be kind of familiar with. Now if you go into here and we look for assignment, I'm just going to add in a little dummy variable so you can just something that's fairly irrelevant, and let's go off to Reese's fantastic data painter. Now, if you go over to lists, you'll see a couple in here. One is, by the way, is if you need a sequential value, which especially if you're doing a lot of work with databases, we now retain our own sequences inside Modeler. So if you have create a sequence called customer ID and you request that, using our Modeler API, it would start with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that's actually quite a useful little feature as well, but just that's kind of an aside. Now, if we go and look at resolve list and we click on the plus, the first thing is we've got to go find the list. So let's go and find courier, and we should find courier routes. Now here we have basically kind of, it's almost like a where builder. It's a little bit like, if you're familiar, it's basically very similar to building SQL. So what we're going to actually pull in here is maybe the courier and the courier route number. The one in this particular case, we're using courier. You can do distincts, you can do order bys, you can limit the number of rows that you're interested. You can do random, or you could, if you're doing distinct order by, then you wouldn't be using random, for example. Now, if you click on plus rule, what you'll see is that it will pick up the columns that I showed you previously in the list. So we've got from country, and it will refer to the variables, the other variables inside the model. So if we go over here, we'll go to the sender address, okay? And then we add another rule, and then we've got to country. And what we're looking for is the recipient's address. And then we want to add one more, which is the dangerous goods indicator. And sure enough, there's one called dangerous goods indicator. Now, these have all been set as part of the model. And we click on OK, and that will build you. Now, this is quite a complicated resolve function. So that's why we've created the kind of wizard approach for you to be able to do that. You can play around with it yourself a little bit, but I always use this new data painter function. Now, what this is, I'll just cancel that for the minute and cancel that. Now, if we look at what we're doing here, it's dependent on the combinations of dangerous goods, etc. If we look at the courier routes, what we're doing is we're going to go and populate the courier route and the courier with values from this list. So depending on this and this, we will populate it with these values. Okay. Now you will see that in some cases we've got 3 different couriers, 1, 2, 3. Now, if inside every model that you're actually generating messages for example, there will be a little variable by default called how many rows to create. Now, all you have to do is if you go in and let's just go through that one more time, and we go to lists, you will see a little thing called resolve list count. Again, we can go to courier routes. Now, in this particular case, what we're doing is we just need the same rules. So now the advantage of this particular approach is that it allows you to count the values that are in that particular where clause that we were using before. So we obviously had a where clause where we had 3 variables that we cared about, which was the from country, the to country, and the dangerous goods indicator. Now that means that we now know how many of these there are for the particular combination of data that you have. So what does that mean? That means that as we are now setting that value, so for Oz, dangerous goods, there are actually 3 of them. How many rows to create will create you 3 distinct messages for that path. Now, if we look at the paths or test cases, there are actually 15 of them. Now, each one of these is a different variation of message. However, what we've decided to do is we actually want for each variation, we also want to have every courier shipping, every courier route is covered as well. Okay. Now, when you do your create messages, create message from a CSV, and you click on execute, you will get dynamic repeaters, which means if any information in your target system has changed, they've added a new configuration, they've added a new route, the next time you do your generate, you will actually get all of those values. So in this case, you can see we've generated quite a lot of them. It's about 40 odd different messages. Now, if we go in here, whenever you generate messages, we actually create a little CSV. That CSV is quite a useful place because this is what we put into the templates. Now, if we go across, what you'll see is that we've got the courier routes DHL 1, 2, and 3, which means for this particular combination of Oz, Oz, dangerous goes, we've actually basically in effect created 3 distinct messages. Okay, so if you're interested in making sure that all the messages go to every broker, to every combination of currencies, all you really have to do is just add in that basically this how many rows to count with the same where clause, and you will then get out all combinations of messages based on the data that has come from the target system. Okay, is that okay? So I think we're now going over to back to young James. Is that right?
Yep, thanks Hugh. Absolutely brilliant.
Cheers.
Okay, let me share the screen again. So thank you for that. So the next one I just wanted to talk about was something that has come through from a lot of customers. So one of the things that often happens when people are building models is that they will overlay rules and constraints on top of the model to start to map out and overlay business logic that would otherwise be difficult to represent, in the model itself as nodes and processes. Okay. Now, one of the tricky pieces with debugging these constraints is that it can be very tricky to actually understand what the impact of that constraint is and when it is, impacting the tests that are being generated. So sometimes people will hit the generate button and they will either get paths, which they did not want to be present, or you may notice that a lot of paths are missing that you actually wanted to be in there. Now, what we have added in is the ability to be able to go into a rule. And you'll see we've got an example rule here where we're taking 2 variables and we've assigned some constraints to them. And what you'll see now is in the top right, there is this switch button. You can enable it, and leave it on, or you can come through, you can disable it. You can go away and do your generate, and you can see, what paths have come through as part of that. Okay, so this is just a little way of being able to very quickly come in, turn on and off nodes, and that is something that's come through, as from a few customers as a request to have. Now, the last piece I just want to finish up on is that there is lots of stuff that's been going on in the development world, which has made its way into the product. Some of them have not obviously made it into this webinar that we're presenting today. But if you come over to the product, you'll see in the bottom left, we have the release notes section. Okay. And if you look under here, you'll see literally all of the stuff that has got in for July. Some of the big ones here that I think are particularly interesting, which we'll talk about in the next product update we do in the next quarter, is the Postman collection import, which allows you to import Postman collections, so existing test suites you have in Postman. And the other big one here is our connector with Confluence, which obviously a lot of organizations are using to track their requirements and documentation, very early on in the release cycle. So if you come over to the release notes and you want to get a little glimpse of this before we give the next product update, you can come in, click on the link, and you'll see we've got a little video here which walks through each of the features that are in here. Okay. So definitely check out the release notes, take a look at the videos, and yeah, if you're interested in any of these features, feel free to get in touch, and we'll be more than happy to work through these with you on that. So with that being said, that's all from me. So thank you so much. Thanks, Reese. Really appreciate it.